Now, what does it mean to lock in and reset your gains in an index universal life policy? Welcome to episode 8 of our Secrets to a Tax-Free Growth series. Now that we've gone over in the last episode how IUL can provide upside potential with complete market downturn protection, now what we're going to do to build off of that is show even when you do make gains, those gains can actually become newly protected principal, meaning when you make money, that money's no longer at risk to be lost again. Let's get into it. We're going to pick right back up exactly where we left off last video with a $1 million in cash value that we put into 1 year point to point. If you haven't seen the last video, as always, the link will be in the description. Make sure you watch that first. This information is just crucial. It's starting to get excited, so let's do it. So in that last example, we had $1 million in cash value. The GAP rate was 4%, so they credited us $40,000. With that $40,000, we bought an upside option that was tied to the S&P 500, which did 10% and credited $100,000 back to our account, and we're left with $1.1 million in cash value. So if you're a little confused, you're not following along entirely, all you need to know is now we have a policy with $1.1 million in cash value. What happens next? Now, one thing to remember, that entire $100,000 that was credited to get us from 1 million to 1.1 million was entirely tax-free. There's no capital gains tax. You weren't realizing any gains. It's completely tax-free and credited back in to our cash value. So it grew tax-free. If you wanted to access that via policy loan, you could access that tax-free. And if you died and passed away, it would transfer tax-free. Why? Because it's insurance. So continuing the example, now we have the 1.1 million in cash value, and all we're gonna do is repeat the process. So we take our 4% rate that they're crediting us, now on the 1.1 instead of just 1. So instead of 40,000, they gave us 44,000. That's 4% of the 1.1 million. With that 44,000, what do? We don't just credit it back to our account. We don't just keep the fixed rate. Instead, we buy an upside option. We're going to buy that same upside option, the exact same index to the S&P 500. That's a 1 year point to point. We will match what it does in the next year. If the S&P 500 goes down, again, that option expires what? Completely worthless. What happens to the 44,000? It's gone. We lost it. What happens to our 1.1 million? Still there. We made money last year. Market went down this year. Doesn't matter. The money that we made last year is protected. The 44,000 that we put into the option this year, that's expired worthless. So you didn't make anything, but when everyone else lost, you didn't. You kept what you had. Now again, just to continue using whole numbers, if the market did 10% that year, that 44,000 would turn into 110,000. Hence, that's 10% of 1.1 million. That 110,000 is then credited back to our policy. Now we have 1.21 million, and that is now newly protected principal. If the market goes down next year, we still keep that. That is what's called locking in and resetting. Each time that 1 year point to point expires, we put that money back in there, we've locked in those gains, and we reset. That's newly protected principal. So are you starting to see how we're not using the money that you're putting in the policy and that is cash value to put into options, but instead we're using the money that they would have credited that account and put that into options, so that even when we make gains and put that back into our account, we can't lose again. That's the power of indexing as a strategy. The best metaphor I can think to use is it's like a ratchet wrench. So when you turn the wrench to the right, what happens? The bolt gets tighter. When you turn the wrench to the left, does the bolt get looser? No, it stays exactly where it is. It's just winding up for it to come back. Well, now when you turn it to the right again, the bolt stayed exactly where it was and it starts getting tighter. Let's say the market goes down. You turn it back to the left, the bolt didn't change. It's still right there. It's just winding up for when you turn it back to the right again, it can continue getting tighter. And that is how the ratchet wrench metaphor kind of parallels or explains the theory of lock-in and reset. So before we conclude, let's look at a really simple example with actual numbers so you can kind of see how this works. We're going to assume in year 1 you gain 10%, year 2 0, year 3 10, year 4 0, year 5 10. So the market went up 10% in years 1, 3, and 5, and years 2 and 4 the market went down. So if you started with $1 million in year 0, and then the market went up 10% in year 1, well, now you were left with 1.1 million. The next year the market went down. So what happens? We keep the 1.1 million. The next year the market went up 10%. So what happens? The 1.1 turns into 1.21 million. Year 4, unfortunately, the market went down. You didn't gain anything, but you didn't lose anything. It still stays the 1.21 million. Year 5, the market went up 10%. So what happens? It gains 10% again. If the market were to go down the next year, you would keep that number. You're not losing anything because the only money that you're actually putting into the option is money that they would have credited you on your cash value. You're not putting your actual cash value into the option. So now that we've gone over indexing with our 1 year point to point, it's time to get into the different types of indexing. There's also multi-year point to points. There's monthly point to points. There's what's called dollar cost averaging. There's spreads, there's participation rates, there's multipliers. In our very next video in episode 9, we are going to cover all of that. It sounds like a lot, don't worry, it's not. We're gonna go over it very thoroughly, but also very simply to make sure you can understand this and have it down. Finally, it's worth saying congratulations if you have made it this far in the series. It's been very exciting to make for you. If you continue to go through, not only will you be well on your way to creating some tax-free growth for your financial future, but most importantly, creating peace in your finances so you can focus on what matters most to you. If you want to skip the line, as always, you can book a free 20-minute quick consult with myself. I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, I will see you in episode 9. See you there.